Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of This One's Dedicated To. My name's Chris Barton.
And I'm Jennifer Ziegler, and we both create books for young people. And usually on This One's Dedicated To, we speak to other creators of books for young readers about the dedications in their books.
Today, we are joined by an expert on reading those books, on loving those books, on creating community around those books, educator Donalyn Miller, co-author of The Joy of Reading. Hello, Donalyn. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Jenny. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, we're so happy you're here. So there are two dedications in The Joy of Reading, one by you and one by your co-author, the late and deeply missed Teri Lesesne. To start us off, could you please read aloud your dedication?
To Toby, thank you for your belief in this book for so many years. Our bag of scraps is finally a quilt because of you.
That's lovely. What can you tell us about Toby and why this book is dedicated to her?
So Toby may not be well known to many people, but she should be. Toby Anteo is one of the top editors at Heinemann Publishing. She's not just my editor, Teri's editor, but she's also the editor for authors such as Sarah Ahmed, Smokey Daniels, Kate Roberts, some of the people who are considered experts in my field. And when I realized that Toby was going to get to be the editor for this book with us, I felt like I had made it. They gave me a really good editor. So, of course, the validity as an author is that, hey, I must be a pretty decent writer. You can also get in your head and go, well, maybe they think I need the expert help. So I don't know. But I already knew Toby. I had met her many times. She was lovely. And I was delighted that we got to work together. The book would not exist without Toby. And I say this, and it's no hyperbole on my part. Teri and I started working on the book for 7 years. And Teri was sick with cancer 5.5 of those years. The book started out as a book on reading engagement, and it became a book on joy. And Toby kept everything, every email, every note. I have, no joke, a piece of, the brown paper towels you get out of a school dispenser? I have one of those in Teri Lesesne's handwriting with a chart that actually shows up in the response chapter of Joy. I mean, we have literal cocktail napkins here, people. Toby kept everything. And when Teri got sick, she couldn't write anymore the past couple of years. She couldn't revise the book with me. And we wrote the book by Voxer. Honestly, I would Voxer her questions. Hey, tell me a story about a time when. And I have gotten so many compliments from people on how strong Teri's voice is in the book. And that's because of Toby, because Toby saved every scrap. She saved every scrap, and she helped me take all those Voxer interviews with Teri and keep her voice alive.
It's fantastic.
Well, Teri, AKA Professor Nana, she died in August of 2021, the year before The Joy of Reading came out. She dedicated the book to the Quarantine Book Club, to the hashtag Quarantine Book Club. Thanks for your friendship and for all of the incredible books we've shared. I don't know if you had a chance to discuss the dedication with Teri, but could you talk a little bit about the importance to Teri of the Quarantine Book Club?
Well, Teri, that was her dedication. When the pandemic shutdown happened in March of 2020, Teri moved to teaching virtual classes at the university. A lot of us, I just stopped working basically, like many people did, and felt like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to work on that book. So we have a mutual friend in Jennifer Lagarde, and you might know Jennifer as Library Girl on Twitter. And Jennifer told me that she just missed running into all of our colleagues out working in schools and all the work that we were doing. And she said, I would love to start some sort of Zoom book club. And I said, well, I'll be in it. And she said, well, who else could we get to be in it? And so we invited Teri, and we invited Frankie Siverson, And we invited our friend Catherine Salkalowski, who teaches middle school and writes romance novels in Illinois, and our friend Cindy Minnick, who teaches high school in Pennsylvania. Now she's a librarian also. And the five of us started meeting every single Friday on Zoom. And we read young adult literature almost exclusively that year. I know we read Deborah Wiles' Kent State that year. We read, I know we've read Tiffany Jackson's book, newest book. We read so many books. There's pictures of us with all the books floating around. But, it was not only that. We reflecting on that group now, and I talked to them this week because I wanted them to know about this. And I also gave them the opportunity to opt out if they didn't want to be named. And they all said, of course we want to be named. We're so proud of being in it ourselves because we know we were part of something special, Sometimes you don't realize you're part of something special when you're in it, but we did. And we would sometimes, every one of us would come to a meeting not having read the book. At some point, we still came to the meetings because of the community. But also, I never walked out of that meeting without a podcast, a movie I should be watching, a TV show, someone I should be following online, 13 more people I need to go follow their newsletter. I mean, it was such a rich source of information. It was also interesting. COVID was hitting all of us differently. The way Texas responded to COVID is different than Washington State responded to COVID, is different than Illinois responded to COVID, is different than Ohio and Pennsylvania responded to COVID. So because we were all from different regions, different affiliations, political leadership, beliefs about COVID, everything, we were all kind of coming together as a State of the Union once a week to just kind of talk about what was going on. We did not know, but we slowly began to understand that Teri was dying. And she would come to the meeting sometimes and not turn her camera on. And she was a very quiet person about her illness, and it was her illness, so she should get to decide how she wants to deal with it. But it was hard for us to see her go in that decline and know that she didn't necessarily want to talk to us about it. But after she died, the very first meeting that we had, we still have meetings, just not once a week anymore. We still have meetings. And we were talking about the fact that we wished we had known more about how poorly she was doing at the end. But we also agreed that maybe that club once a week was a little oasis where she didn't have to deal with it, where she could still be Professor Nana giving her reviews, her heartfelt reviews of the books that we had read, her opinions about what was going on in the world. I mean, it was pure Teri for an hour a week. And I mean, really, what a delight, what a blessing for all of us, right? So I think now that maybe the club was a little oasis for her in all of that. And it makes even more sense to me that when I said, who do you want your dedication to be? And I thought it would be, she's dedicated. This is one of the benefits of getting to publish more than one book, right? You get to dedicate your books to more than one person. And she dedicated a book to her husband and her grandkids. And I guess it was the club. That's what meant the most to her.
What a joy. What a gift. And speaking of joy, I want, this just moved me so much, Donalyn, because I feel like you lived your title there through that book club. And I would like to talk with you about the title of the book. I'm an educator, and I used to teach middle school English language arts. And back when I was a classroom teacher, and I believe it's still this way today, that there was so much pressure put on us to teach reading as a science and to break it down in its component parts and analyze it and learn the rules of reading before you could go off with a book. And, and parents were very fixated on the levels that their children were at. And I'm not saying those things are not valid or important, but nothing was said about the joy of reading, about the relationship between the child and reading. And so when I saw this title, and there's no subtitle, it's just simply The Joy of Reading, I was right away in love with the book. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the title and why you named it that.
Well, for a lot of the reasons you've already named, right? And first off, there is the science of reading, there is the joy of reading. It is all, you know what we call all this stuff outside of schools? We just call it reading, right? You know, I think that we've schooled all over it is part of the problem. And I'm saying that as an educator who's won awards for being a teacher. And I think we've schooled all over reading. I think about when I was in the 70s growing up, you know, and I did SRA cards and vocabulary, spelling lists, and all this stuff that we now would never claim is best practice for kids. But we also got our library books. And at least we had one pure time a day after lunch where my teacher would read out loud to us and we could read our library books. But, you know, we made a big shift during that time where we started using children's literature more in instruction. Teachers started using trade books for read alouds. They started using novels. I remember when I was a new teacher going to the teacher supply store, the wall of novel units where you could just get your packet of worksheets for Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. I mean, that's how it was when I started teaching. And I think what happened was, in some ways, we took children's books away from kids. And we insinuated ourselves, and I say we because I am certainly, I have grown, but I didn't start here as a teacher or a parent. This is my evolution, right? So I think that we started making kids do all this work with everything that they're reading. And what we did was we ruptured the relationship between the author and the child. You know, ultimately, let's say the good authors I know don't write their books so they can be turned into worksheets and packets and units. They write them so that children can learn, grow, be edified, find joy, have a wonderful experience, learn, connect. All of these reasons that readers read anything are the reasons that the people who write books for children write them for children. They want children to have those experiences. And I don't think anyone says, I'm writing this book so kids can make a great diorama out of it. So I wanted to remind everyone, who does reading really belong to anyway? Because if we ever think it solely belongs to schools, we don't care about kids and reading anymore. We don't care about their reading lives. And, you know, no one would ever tell the child athlete that they should not find enjoyment in football. They should just drill. No one would ever tell a kid who was learning to play the violin that they should just drill and never find any joy in it. But we do not see that we are absolutely doing the same thing with reading in kids. And I've talked to too many adults who I think believe that the joy of reading is incidental. It's a fluke. It happens in homes where the adult readers are bananas about reading. But it's not something we could reasonably expect as an outcome for most children, and therefore they don't need to put any effort into cultivating it. You know, we talk about the science of reading, and I don't know a single teacher who doesn't think that kids don't need high quality reading instruction. I've never met anyone that says that. I defy anyone to introduce me to people who do. But what about the science of engagement? What about the science around libraries? What about the science around the value of representation in children's books? What about the science? And when I say science, I mean documented studies that have been replicated over and over. What about the direct link between children's scores on all these standardized reading tests and how much time they invest in reading for pleasure? And we seem to forget the for pleasure part every single time. There are a lot of conversations about kids and reading that don't seem to have any kids in it or reading. There's a lot of conversations about what I call reading related activities, reading adjacent activities. And that's a study that we don't talk about either. The studies that show that the majority of time kids spend in language arts class, they are not reading, they are not writing. They are doing reading adjacent activities. Filling out worksheets is the primary writing that they do. If we want kids to become readers, we probably need to let them.
Yes, that's simple.
As I've read the joy of reading, it feels like, you know, such a powerful way to evaluate, you know, recent legislation, shifts in curriculum or educational policy, so-called reforms. You know, does this particular change increase the joy of reading or does it diminish it? Is that use of the joy of reading, is that purpose anything that you and Teri discussed when you were making the book?
Well, Teri was a firebrand on this issue long before she and I were ever collaborators. I mean, I think one of the first articles I ever read that the woman wrote was about soft censorship. She taught me what soft censorship was, that preemptive censorship, where a teacher, a librarian, or an administrator will just not purchase a book or not even add it to the collection in fear of potential censorship. And that has been my concern from the very beginning. I did an interview with someone last year and I said, for every teacher we see on the news who is getting fired over a poem that she's read, there's 100 more quietly packing up their classroom libraries and taking them home.
Mm-hmm.
So when we, looking at the book, this is an access issue and a choice issue and a community issue. I mean, it's so much nested in so many things that we talked about in the book. When we remove any books from children's and families' access, we are reducing their access points. So no, joy is less possible when you have limited access. One of the key pieces of access that we don't talk about enough, Teri and I did talk about it in the book, but a child's access to books is directly limited by the knowledge and the biases of the adults around them. So knowledge being, honestly, a teacher who doesn't know that much about children's and young adult literature is not going to be as effective at matching their child with books without some resources as a teacher who may have more knowledge. So that's just a knowledge piece. Maybe a more experienced teacher, maybe a teacher who's more involved online with some communities. You would have to go out and get information if you personally lacked it in order to provide equitable access to a child. But you also have all the biases that adults bring to the table too, that limit children's access to information, to voices. So right away, we can see that censorship denies access. Well, there's no choice either. Mm-hmm. Choice from what? Yeah. Choice from what? Choice is a privilege that depends on access. Choice from what? Yeah. I had a tussle with the group in Florida this year. Hasn't everyone had a tussle with the group in Florida this year? And they sent me a list of approved materials that I could talk about. I did not talk to this group, but they sent me a list, and you'll be happy to know that Dr. Dolittle is still being taught somewhere in America. I mean, really, this is what and so what choice? And we're shocked that kids don't read. Yeah, because they all want to read about a 40-year-old bachelor who smokes and thinks he can talk to llamas. Yes, this is motivating today's teens to read. Meanwhile, you have a complete cognitive dissonance. Go to TikTok and look at Book Talk and see what teens are actually doing with reading. The cognitive dissonance between the adults over here who are trying to shield little Joey from knowing that gay people exist, and little Joey's life on TikTok. I mean, really, it's just, I don't know. It doesn't, I don't, they're not protecting kids.
Well, that's where I think focusing on the joy of reading, like what gives you the right to deny me, my family, us, this joy? Mm-hmm. I feel like such a potent, the overall theme of your and Teri's book is such a potent rebuttal to that, to those efforts. Like you have a choice of increasing joy or diminishing joy. What you are proposing diminishes it.
Teri and I have never lost sight of what the end game was that at the end, we would like someone who felt like reading gave them power, reading gave them joy, reading gave them the ability to extend their own learning when no one was controlling their learning anymore. And there are a lot of ways that we can do that now, and books are just one of the media that help us do that. But we've always felt that too many kids weren't even given the chance to fall in love with reading. They weren't even given the chance. We just presumed they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And so we never gave them the chance. And that is just a travesty. It's a travesty. So it's more about thinking reflectively as adults about what we're really trying to accomplish with kids and reading, and the disconnect between our beliefs and our actions.
I love hearing about book clubs that are like your book club that teens are doing. I bet there's no worksheets. You don't do worksheets with the quarantine bookshop, book club. do you?
Don't even take attendance. People don't even have to have their cameras on. We have no rules at all.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the only other thing that I just keep thinking about over and over is that it's art, language arts. It's an art appreciation class. The people who are teachers, librarians, parents who were probably the best readers and writers the kids know. How can we miss an opportunity to show them what's beautiful about it? If they're not going to get it from us, who are they going to get it from? The minute we started testing literature, it stopped becoming an art form, it seems. It just became a technical skill we needed to perform. You know, I think we even said this in Joy. Reading is a transformative act, not a performative one. And we need to put the art back in the language arts, or we'd never put a worksheet on a children's book again.
Please.
You know, I can only imagine how many people who have read this book and who are going to read this book are going to be themselves transformed in the way that they teach, and the ripple effects that's going to have on their students and generations of students is just really kind of amazing to consider.
It's a lot of food for thought, and it's the care that has been put into this, like you said, even the choice of the colors and the look and the feel. You know, you put a lot of care into the experience of reading this book, and really improving the experience. And I thank you so much for this. Is there anything else you want us to know about the book, the dedications, about Teri, anything?
I just, you know, it's hard still to talk about Teri. You know, I will always. How did you spend the pandemic, Donalyn? I spent the pandemic shut down, writing a book with my friend about joy while she was dying. It's an incredible blessing that I got to do that, because Teri was amazing. You know, I was talking to my husband this morning about her and just how much we miss her as a friend, but I think when I gained Teri Lesesne's respect is when I really thought I'd made it, because she was tough and she did not suffer fools. And she was not a huge fan of mine when I first came on the scene. I was a dilettante. Who was I? She had a PhD, right? And I even teased her. This is a story a lot of people don't know. Our friends know. Teri turned down an opportunity to write the foreword for the Book Whisperer because she didn't know me that well, and she didn't respect my work at the time. I wore her down, though. And you might notice my second book, she wrote the foreword.
Yes.
And that journey, I consider a tremendous accomplishment, because Teri, she was tough. She really believed in what she was talking about. It was her life's work. And I was just in awe of her. And so the idea that she in any way thought I was even good enough to be her collaborator makes me feel like I have to earn it every day. I know that's silly. I don't have anything to prove to her by the end. But I'm carrying our book by ourselves. She's not here. And so I will. I used to joke, Gary Paulson did not write Hatchet so kids could make a diorama about being in the woods. I met the man. I didn't ask him that question, but I'm pretty sure that was not his motivation. So, but you can go online right now and find a 52-page packet on Hatchet with directions on how to build a diorama about being in the woods. So I think we schooled all over reading.